Cars whipped past like streaks of light, but none of them slowed for the silver SUV sitting dead on the shoulder of Interstate 84. The morning sun glared off the hood, making the steam rising from the engine look almost ghostly. Inside, a man in a navy suit paced back and forth, running a hand through his hair with the frantic energy of someone who wasn't used to being powerless. This man, Grant Ellison, had built an empire from nothing. He had bought companies, sold companies, doubled fortunes, and crushed deadlines. He knew how to talk to investors, sway markets, and negotiate like oxygen itself depended on it. But all his influence meant nothing when his engine simply refused to start. Nothing, that is, until a man who owned almost nothing walked toward him. The figure approached slowly along the gravel, his worn jacket zipped halfway, his jeans faded from years of use. His shoes were the kind you'd only keep wearing because they were the only pair you had. He carried a canvas backpack slung over one shoulder. But his face, a deep brown complexion, framed with a short beard, held a gentleness that felt out of place on the hard roadside. "Morning," he said. His voice was quiet, steady. "Looks like trouble." Grant turned, startled. The man didn't look threatening, if anything, he looked tired. Life had obviously been unkind to him, yet he stood with a calm dignity Grant wasn't used to seeing. "Yeah," Grant sighed, forcing frustration down. "It just died on me. I've got someone coming, but who knows when they'll actually show up." The man nodded once. "I can take a look, if you want." Grant hesitated. He wasn't used to accepting help, especially from strangers clearly going through their own fight. But something about the man's presence, the grounded steadiness in his eyes, softened the resistance. "You know cars?" Grant asked. A small, humble smile formed. "Used to. Before things changed." Grant stepped aside. "All right. I'd appreciate it." The man introduced himself simply as Marcus Reed. He walked around to the front and popped the hood. The moment he looked inside, Grant could tell this wasn't guesswork. Marcus touched wires gently, inspected connections, tapped lightly in places Grant didn't even know existed under a hood. "You try starting it again?" Marcus asked. Grant slid into the seat and turned the key. The engine coughed but didn't catch. Marcus leaned closer. "Thought so. Your ignition coil's loose. Probably rattled off if you hit a pothole." He tightened something with his fingers, wiped his hands on his jacket, then stepped back. "Try now." Grant turned the key again. This time, the engine responded immediately, roaring back to life like nothing had happened. Grant blinked. He stepped out of the car, almost embarrassed at how relieved he felt. "How did you?" "That would have cost me hours at a shop." Marcus shrugged. "Just something I used to be good at." "Used to?" Grant asked gently. Marcus's eyes drifted toward the highway. "Life's a long road. Some turns you don't expect." Then he lifted his backpack. "Anyway, glad it wasn't anything bigger. You're good to go." Grant reached for his wallet without thinking. "Let me pay you for your time. You just saved my entire morning." But Marcus lifted a hand, soft refusal, but firm. "I don't need money. I just saw someone who needed help." Grant wasn't used to refusal. Not from employees, not from partners, not from anyone. The sincerity in Marcus's voice unsettled him, because it was real. Everyone in Grant's world did things for money. Everyone expected something in return. But this man didn't. "At least let me buy you breakfast," Grant tried. "Coffee? Anything?" Marcus shook his head. "I'm all right." "Really?" Grant noticed the patched backpack. The fraying cuffs on the jacket. The exhaustion that lived behind Marcus's polite smile. He wasn't all right. But he carried himself like a man determined not to burden anyone, even if the world had already burdened him enough. Marcus started to walk away, but paused. He looked back at Grant with a thoughtful expression. "You look like someone who's been running so fast, you forgot where you were trying to go," Marcus said quietly. "Don't let the wrong thing steer your life." Then he turned back toward the long stretch of highway and continued walking, his steps slow but certain. Grant stood there, unable to move. A stranger he'd met for 5 minutes had just delivered a truth no one in his life had ever dared to say. That night, the sound of the engine restarting repeated in his mind, but it wasn't the engine that kept him awake, it was Marcus's last sentence. Running fast, but toward what? By morning, Grant knew one thing with complete clarity. He needed to find Marcus again. Grant woke earlier than usual, the weight of Marcus's words still pressed against his thoughts. Running fast, but toward what? It echoed louder than any business meeting, louder than any deal he had looming today. For the first time in years, he skipped his morning briefing, cancelled his executive calls, and asked his driver to take the day off. Instead, he got behind the wheel of his newly revived SUV and headed back toward Interstate 84. He wasn't sure what he expected to find. People like Marcus didn't exactly stay in one place. Life pushed them from one sidewalk to another, from one shelter to the next, from one forgotten corner to the one slightly warmer. But Grant had made up his mind, he wasn't letting this go. Not because he felt guilty. Not because he felt indebted. But because the world was full of people who wanted something from him, and Marcus was the first person in years who didn't. Grant drove slowly along the shoulder where they had met, his eyes scanning the fields and gravel paths. Nothing. He checked nearby truck stops, small diners, even walked through a gas station lot asking if anyone had seen a tall black man carrying a canvas backpack. Most people didn't know. One attendant shrugged and said she'd seen someone fitting that description heading toward Maple Ridge, a nearby small town. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Grant drove there next. Maple Ridge wasn't the kind of place billionaires like him ever visited. Small shops, cracked sidewalks, an old bus station that looked like it had been forgotten decades ago. He stepped out onto the sidewalk feeling strangely out of place, but determined. He spent the next hour asking around. Some people ignored him, others stared suspiciously. But eventually, an older man sweeping the porch outside a hardware store looked up at the mention of Marcus's name. "You mean Marcus Reed?" the man asked. "Quiet fella. Keeps to himself." Grant nodded eagerly. "Yes, where did you see him?" The man pointed toward a small park a few blocks away. "He sleeps there sometimes. Doesn't cause trouble. Just, seems like someone life knocked down hard." Grant thanked him and hurried toward the park. The place was empty at first glance, just a few benches, some trees, a lonely drinking fountain. Then Grant saw it, a worn backpack tucked neatly beneath a bench. Marcus sat nearby, his legs stretched out, staring at the fountain as if deep in thought. Grant approached slowly. "Marcus?" Marcus looked up, surprised but not startled. "Grant? Didn't expect to see you again." "I went looking for you," Grant said honestly. "I wanted to talk." Marcus studied him carefully, not suspicious, but cautious, like someone who'd learned not to trust easily. "Everything okay with the car?" "Car's fine," Grant said. "I came because I owe you more than a thank you." Marcus shook his head. "I don't want anything from you." "I know," Grant replied. "That's why I'm here." Marcus quietly motioned for him to sit. Grant lowered himself onto the bench, feeling strangely nervous. For a moment, neither spoke. The breeze rustled through the trees, and a few kids played across the park. Life moved around them while the two men sat in stillness, one with everything money could buy, the other with almost nothing at all. Finally, Grant exhaled. "Can I ask what happened? How you ended up here?" Marcus didn't flinch at the question. But he didn't answer right away either. His gaze drifted toward the pavement, as if he were choosing his words carefully. I wasn't always like this, Marcus said softly. I had a job. A house. A family I was trying to build. Things were good, simple, but good. I worked as a mechanic at a shop for years. Loved it. I liked fixing things. Machines make sense. They break for a reason, and you can put them back together if you know how. He paused. People aren't always that simple. Grant listened, leaning slightly forward. My wife got sick, Marcus continued, voice tightening. Medical bills stacked up. I worked double shifts, then triple. Still couldn't keep up. We lost the house. Then. I lost her too. His voice broke at the edges. He cleared his throat, gripping his backpack strap. After that, I stopped trying. Stopped caring about anything except waking up each day and putting one foot in front of the other. Some days, even that felt like too much. Silence settled heavily between them. Grant's chest tightened. In all his years of business, he'd met people who hid behind polished veneers. He'd met people who pretended their lives were perfect, people who chased wealth, power, prestige. But he'd never met someone who spoke about pain with such raw honesty. Marcus wasn't ashamed of his story. He wasn't playing for sympathy. He was simply telling the truth. I'm sorry, Grant said quietly. No one should have to go through that alone. Marcus nodded but didn't respond. Grant hesitated before asking, where do you go from here? Do you have a plan? Marcus breathed out a tired laugh. Survive today. That's the plan. Tomorrow will figure itself out. Grant felt something shift inside him, an uncomfortable, aching realization. For the first time in his life, he was sitting across from someone whose strength wasn't measured in money, but in surviving pain that would have crushed most people. Marcus, Grant said, voice steadying. What if I help you find a new direction? Marcus turned, eyebrows lifting slightly, not in excitement, but in caution. Help me how? He asked. Grant didn't have an answer yet. But he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't walk away from Marcus Reed again. Grant didn't have a plan when he made the offer, but he knew one thing with complete certainty, walking away from Marcus didn't feel right. Something inside him, something he had ignored for years, was awake now. Marcus studied him, weighing his sincerity the way someone who had been disappointed too many times naturally would. People make promises out of guilt, he said quietly. I don't need that. This isn't guilt, Grant replied. You helped me when you had nothing to gain. You didn't even want money. The world needs people like you, but you need someone in your corner too. Marcus looked away, conflicted. I don't want to be someone's project. You won't be, Grant said. But everyone deserves a chance to get back on their feet. Let me help you find yours. For a long moment, Marcus didn't speak. The sounds of the park filled the space, kids laughing, wind moving through the leaves, the distant hum of cars. Finally, he exhaled. What are you offering, exactly? Grant met his eyes. A job. A real one. You know engines better than most mechanics I've met. I own a small transportation company in Ridgewater. I can put you on the team, get you housing, give you stability again. Marcus blinked, stunned. You do that for me? Grant nodded. You already did something for me. You reminded me what matters. Emotion flickered across Marcus's face, relief, disbelief, maybe even hope. He looked down at his worn shoes, then slowly back up. I don't want charity, he whispered. And I'm not offering any, Grant said. I'm offering respect. And a road back. A long silence stretched, then Marcus finally extended his hand. All right. I'll try. Grant shook it firmly, not as a billionaire, not as a rescuer, but as a man recognizing another man's strength. That handshake didn't just change Marcus's future. It changed Grant's. Because in helping a homeless stranger find his footing again, Grant discovered something money had never been able to buy. Purpose. And Marcus learned something too: sometimes, life gives back in the exact moment you start believing it never will.